If you don't want to be part of the 20% of B2B salespeople who are going to lose their jobs, the jobs are just not going to exist by 2020, then this episode is for you. Hello, Sales Nation, and welcome to today's episode of the Salesman Podcast. On today's show, we have Graham Hawkins. He is the author of The Future of the Sales Profession. And on today's show, that's what we're diving into, the future of it all. Is it dying? Is it changing? What do we need to do right now so that we can align ourselves to have success in the kind of 12, 24, 36-month period that's coming up? How artificial intelligence is going to take a whole ton of your jobs away as Sales Nation and a whole lot more. And so with all that said, let's jump in to today's show. Graham, welcome to the Salesman Podcast.
Thank you, Will.
Glad to have you on, mate. We're going to dive into a topic today where hopefully we can ruffle some feathers. We can give some real insights. I give my thoughts on this, and I know you've done a little bit of research kind of towards the book and probably since then as well, which will tie it all together. But I'm going to ask you a question that I think I know the answer to, but we'll see where we go from there. And that is the profession of sales, B2B sales specifically, is it dying a death right now in 2017?
Well, look, I'm not sure if it's dying a death completely, but it's certainly in major transition, that's for sure. I think everyone's talking about it now, the fact that we're seeing, pretty serious layoffs by people like, Cisco announcing another round. We've had Oracle, we've had a number of the big technology vendors laying lots and lots of salespeople off in the last sort of 3 or 4 months. So, I go back to what Forrester said in 2015, about 20% of the overall B2B sales population disappearing more or less by 2020. It sounds like, that's looking fairly accurate. So it's definitely transitioning and changing. I don't know about it dying. I think my personal view is there'll always be that high-end consultant that needs to help businesses make highly complex, high-value decisions. But my grave fear is for the generalist at the bottom end in those commodity-based sales. I think those people are in real trouble in the future.
Who is it? You may or may not know the data on this, Graham, but who is being laid off right now in these companies? And you don't have to specifically go into the company if you've got any ties with them, of course, but is it internal sales? Is it external sales? Is it the SDRs? Is it the account managers? Is it those consultants that are probably being paid a whole lot more than what people that, I don't want to use a lower end, but there's probably a better way to define it, but the other end of sales where it's more call versus, closing a huge deal like, 2 or 3 a year?
Yeah, look, it's an interesting question. Well, I operate obviously down here in Australia, and we're a relatively small marketplace. If you're a salesperson confined to the Australian marketplace, that is, you're not operating in the huge growth that we're seeing in Asia Pac, then you are definitely in a very small market. And the bigger vendors down here, they're not telling us too much about, what portions of the organisation are being laid off. But certainly, Cisco and those guys, I know a lot of people in my network are saying that there's lots of outside field salespeople that are now being transitioned. It seems to me like, from what I'm hearing, that certainly the inside sales profession seems to be growing, or that part of the business is growing, but the outside field sales guy is definitely under the pump, under pressure right now. And I go back to what Justin Roth-Marsh says. Field sales was fine when the buyer resided in the field, but the buyer no longer resides in the field, right? So hence the rise of SDRs, hence the rise of inside sales, and it seems like the outside salesperson is definitely the one that's, receiving short shrift at the moment.
And I want to continue to narrow down the focus here, and then eventually we'll hopefully end up with the position that we should all be aiming to get into to have, 5-10 year success in sales moving forward. So if there's a shift from outside to inside, and my experience in medical devices is there's probably always going to have to be medical device sales reps to be in theatres with surgeons. So obviously it's not black and white with everything that we're talking about here. It's not so clean cut. But if there's a shift perhaps in the industry as a whole of outside to inside, is there then a shift internally within sales of splitting in separate roles, or are we still looking to be what would essentially be an outside sales rep who is prospecting, who's closing deals, who's following up afterwards? Is that what we should be looking for in an internal sales role?
Yeah, and another good question, Will. I think the research phase of writing my book, I spent quite a bit of time looking at this dynamic, that this change that you're talking about. And from what I'm seeing, we're moving more and more towards team-based selling. We're talking about sales and marketing being one giant team, inside sales working closely with an outside salesperson, and at various stages of the buying journey, there will be a handoff, there will be specialists brought in at the right time, and nothing new there. But I think when you start to look at the way vendors are now putting some real scrutiny around things like cost of customer acquisition, when you move the cost of customer acquisition or the cost to serve inside, then you do take away a large portion of that cost. Going back again to Forrester, I think it was 2009 when they released that report about the support infrastructure that goes around having an external salesperson. The costs are, in some cases, astronomical. I think there was $177,000 a figure that was quoted back then for each salesperson, outside salesperson, in just pre-sale support, bid teams, sales assistants, all of the people that go around supporting that outside salesperson, adds enormously to the cost of acquisition. And talking to CFOs as I do regularly, they're all looking at that ratio between cost of customer acquisition versus lifetime customer value. And they're all saying that it used to be a ratio of 3 to 1. But, with the increasing cost and the decreasing revenues and the decreasing profit per deal and the shortening of the product cycles, et cetera, they're all starting to look at how can they reduce the cost of acquisition, and moving some of the sales function inside and creating self-service automation is obviously where the business is going. I think natural market forces will mean that most vendors just simply have to look at that in order to increase their margins.
So this is an interesting thought that I've not really deliberated on in the past, but you brought it up here subtly, in that is all this buyer-led, in that buyers don't care if some man or a woman in a suit turns up at the office, shakes some hands, sits down, goes through products, helps them out, face to face? Or is as in they're not fussed on that. They'd rather have a slightly cheaper product than have that person, that individual there in front of them in the field sales role? Or is it customer acquisition focused, of internally they can make a higher margin by providing perhaps not as good a service, but they can then close more deals because they can hire more team more internally? Is it the sellers being tight, or is it the buyers demanding this?
I wrote about this exact topic in my most recent post on HubSpot sales blog. In fact, I believe it's a pincer movement. I think that buyers are looking wherever they can to get the best deal, of course, and wherever they can, they'd like to bypass the salesperson. Tim Hughes, as you would know, speaks about buyers going into salesperson avoidance mode. So that's happening, definitely. They would like to get a better deal. They would sometimes like to just self-serve and get a quick win. Sometimes, depending on the industry, depending on the selling model, sometimes talking to a salesperson, actually slows things down. So buyers, on one hand, are trying to self-serve wherever they can. And certainly during the research phase of the book, I spoke with a lot of vendors who are also now looking at how can we reduce the cost of acquisition to stay competitive. So I think there's two diametrically opposed forces now coming to sort of squeeze the salesperson more and more, and we're seeing the proof of that now, Will, with rising underperformance. Again, depending on which analyst you believe, at least 50%, if not more. Some say 63, some say 80% of B2B salespeople are now underperforming. So, the telltale signs are there, I think.
So would it be fair to say that there's the shift in the market is that buyers don't want to deal with salespeople until later in the process, when they actually want to deal with an expert, versus what we think that we should be doing as salespeople a lot of the time is lead gen, is cold calling, is dragging people into our sales funnel? Is it fair to say then that moving forward, and this is what I believe as well, but is it fair to say that moving forward there's going to be lead gen, which will be, it might be in the same team, it might be a group sale of marketing and account-based selling and all this good stuff, but the salesperson will be a higher level expert in the field, perhaps even somewhat of having a personal brand in the field as an expert, and they will be the one that almost resolve the deal, solve any problems, go through any objections, close it, and then perhaps it's onto someone else in customer experience after the fact. Is that a shift that we're going to see here?
100%. I don't think there's any great revelation there. I think most of the world's...
There is, though.
The world's...
There is.
I'm
sorry to interrupt you there. Yes, because I regularly don't have people on the show who are, cold calling first, who are... So the salespeople that I don't want my audience. I strongly believe what we're saying here, and I can see you smiling as we say this because clearly we're on the same track. Clearly, I knew this was going to come in the conversation, and clearly I knew where I wanted the conversation to go. But I'm really passionate to get the audience to know that when you ring me now, I'm a nobody. I run a small business, kind of mid 6-figure turnover kind of thing. I don't have loads of cash to spend, but people still try and cold call me. And when I see a random number on my phone, I don't answer it. If it goes to voicemail, I'll probably listen to the voicemail if I've not had 10, 15 voicemails in the day. If I've had that many, I just delete them all because someone who is actually important to me, I've either got their number or they're going to email and follow up as well. So I'm 100% convinced that full-out cold calling, flat cold calling without any research will fail. Clearly, if you want to define it as warm calling, or you've done a bit of research, you reached out to them socially, you've emailed them, you've called them, it's just another way of getting in front of someone. So I think that's going to be around forever, clearly, as long as you can still get people's numbers. But just being on an auto dialer and call when you've got no knowledge of anyone, I think that's done. And there's some companies that are having success with it right now. I think in 12 months, 24 months, that ends. Now we're getting into what I'm excited about moving forward when we get rid of all that nonsense, which is horrible. It's a horrible job to do. Hopefully people are being compensated well for doing it, but it can't be a nice place to spend 8 hours of your day. And clearly you don't get that time back. So that to me means that I'd have to be compensated crazily for it. And I'd have to want to kind of get out of there 5 years down the line after I've saved a shitload of cash. So getting rid of all that turn sales into what I think it should be, and it should have been the whole time of people are raising their hands, you're speaking to people that want to speak to you, so immediately it's a nicer job to have. You can be compensated, and we'll talk about this in a minute perhaps, of how quotas and compensation was perhaps going to change and evolve. But if you're still compensated well for having a high-level conversation with a high-level decision maker, and perhaps even salespeople are the center of the team with a marketer, with a specialist, with a logistics person, which is my experience in medical devices, then that's a really nice job to have, and we should all be striving for it. So I've kind of thrown a lot at you there, Graham, with no real questions in there. I was just ranting slightly, but is that how you envisioned sales is going to look in 5 years, or am I completely way off on this?
No, you're right on the money, Will. Let's face it, no one's sitting by their phone waiting for a vendor to call them with some, new piece of information that they don't already have. I've spent 28 years in sales and sales leadership roles now. The early part of my career, 15 years, was all about cold calling, cold outreach, prospecting, all that stuff. And back then we had information asymmetry. That is, buyers didn't know how to solve their own problems. Now they do. We have information parity now. And in fact, I've seen it firsthand. In many cases, the buyers know more about the vendor's products than the vendor's own salespeople do. So they're not sitting by their phone waiting for a vendor to help them solve a problem, a salesperson help them solve a problem. So you're absolutely right. Cold calling is dead and gone as far as I'm concerned. If you're not as a salesperson leveraging some of the technology that's available at your fingertips now to warm the call up, personalize the call, make the call relevant, tap into a referral, tap into, some kind of a connection to at least, perhaps get a hook that you might smooth the way into an account, then you're crazy because, as you said, auto dialer or any of these cold outreach type technologies are just, all they're doing is serving to annoy the hell out of your customers. And I keep saying that, if the HubSpot people of the world and some of the people who've done the analysis are right, that the results are about 2%, then it's not just that you're getting a positive return at 2%. You're actually annoying the hell out of people who will never buy from you. We've got nuisance calls registered all over the world now, so I'm 100% with you. Cold calling is dead, And if you have to resort to leveraging cold calling, the message that you're sending to buyers is, I don't have any other options.
That's interesting. And this is a question that I've asked a few people on LinkedIn when they've, I did a post on LinkedIn the other day, essentially this conversation of, if you're cold calling right now, you need to have a real think, and you need to either change jobs if you've got no other opportunities within that organization in the sales space, or you need to, if there are other options, you need to learn new tools, new essentially tactics, new ways of communicating, and we'll touch on that in a second. And they got 100,000 views immediately, and there was 3-4 people that are they run businesses that are software dialers and things like that. So clearly they've got more
vested interest.
Yeah, they've got more heart in it than what the average person has who can see this. But my response was always the same, which you brought up then, which is fantastic, is, can you tell me then how you go about not just burning through? If you're going after the VPs of sales in Fortune 500 companies, you can probably spam them all in a week using an auto dialer. But once you've gone through them, you're done, right? They know who you are. They've not picked up the phone. They don't want to pick up the phone anymore because they've seen that you're just spamming them. And none of these people that were raising their hand to say that cold calling works could answer that question. And I'm open to it. If someone answered that question and said, well, we do this, then we follow up with this, and then this happens, and it's perhaps just super top of the funnel, or we're just going after the super low hanging fruit, and the people that we're going after the market is 10,000 people and not 500 people, then I can somewhat accept that, but no one could give me a straight answer to it. Because I think as soon as you go to the 10,000 people, you're into the world of marketing and mass emails and mass contact and things of that nature, which clearly we're not leveraging our skills as salespeople and these one-on-one connections if we're going after that space. So we mentioned, because I think this is important, and you, in our kind of like pre-interview conversations, this got brought up. If all this is changing, if you're going to have lead gen not done for you necessarily, but some of the buying journey done before you get involved in it, and then you're advising, consulting, facilitating the deal, is compensation going to change? Is our quotas going to change? Are we going to be targeted? Or is that a backward step in that we should be there to help the customer rather than trying to force our way on them, which is, the stereotype of salespeople, because they want to hit quota and they want to earn a big fat commission check at the end of the month?
Yeah, look, it's not a case of whether it's going to change. Will, I think it already is changing. I think we're seeing it already in the high-tech space where I've spent most of my career. Quite a few of the large vendors are now moving away from commission-based compensation, which is attached to a quota of some sort. We recently had a couple of large technology US-based software companies down here in Australia announce that, privately via a couple of people that I know, that they've reduced quotas dramatically. They're now moving away from commissions and, in fact, getting senior or selected salespeople onto equity plans that increase with tenure and are all based around those customer success metrics rather than quota metrics. So I think we're definitely already seeing the beginnings of that. I just personally helped a client of mine employ their first salesperson down here. We offered that person, who was an experienced guy, we offered that person no commission. We offered them an equity share in the company after the probationary period that grows as they stay on longer. And we said there'll be no quota. We will put in place some metrics and KPIs around, customer advocacy, customer success, repeat business, all of those loyalty metrics that everybody's now focused on, NPS scores and that sort of thing. And lo and behold, the sales guy nearly jumped out of his skin to accept the offer because he sees perfect alignment in that model. And when you think about it, it's crazy, isn't it? You're forcing the sales guy to focus on close the deal, get the quota. Everyone's doing, as Derek Wazinski, a friend of mine, says, that the quarterly shuffle or the monthly shuffle. And yet we're also trying, on the other hand, to make sure we create a really great customer experience. And the two just simply don't go together. So I think we're already seeing a move away from the old quota models and commission-based compensation. And I think, frankly, as the job market globally tightens up for the traditional B2B salespeople will no longer be in a position to bargain or to demand that they have these great big salaries that they've been used to in the past. Now, that sounds counterintuitive for a guy like me to say, because I've spent most of my career, on those types of packages and enjoying the good times when they were there. But the truth is now, with the transition to the customer-led era, the buyer's in control. The salespeople are not needed the way they were, and so we're now seeing the salesperson very much on the back foot.
So just to clarify here, do you see that moving forward, someone who's on 100 grand, 200 grand, the role is going to change and they're going to be on less money, even if they're having the same success that they were? And put it into context perhaps of they're going to work at the company for longer because they want to stick around. They don't want to change jobs every 2 years. So just for context, perhaps they've been there for between 5 and 10 years. Are they going to see a drop in money, or with the equity side of things, could that make it somewhat similar?
Look, my personal view on that, Will, is that that is going to happen. I think natural market forces will just simply force that traditional high-earning, high-income sales role. We talked about it earlier, being forced inside, and I think a lot of that high pay will dissipate over time. There'll always be, I think, room at the top end in high complex, high value sales for, some decent compensation for those, I call them the A-grade rock stars, those highly innovative, highly successful, highly specialised salespeople. I think those guys can still earn the big bucks, but the rest of the market will get gradually squeezed back down to something that's a bit more in line with, some of the other job functions, and they won't be in a position to bargain.
Nice. I agree with that. I think the market is the market, isn't it? The market's right. There's not much you can do to argue with it. But I do
the market always decides.
Of course.
Yeah.
And I do like the way, and I do appreciate the way you kind of frame that up, though, of, I think for our audience in particular, if you're listening to a sales podcast, you're probably not, or even if you're not in the role, which is the high end, that top A grade of sales, perhaps you're aspiring to get there. So perhaps my audience is skewed. But I don't think it does any harm for the sales industry to wipe out a whole chunk of, I don't know how to describe it, but the stereotypical salespeople who are rip people off, is a heavy way to say it. But do you know what I'm saying? I don't think it will do any harm for the title of the sales professional to have all of that wiped out and just to be dealing with, and I don't want to say that I'm incredibly, I was always pretty good at sales. I was definitely not in the kind of that top 10% when I was in medical devices. But medical devices as a space was always the hardest here in the UK anyway. Other than like arms dealing and things like that, it was always the hardest industry to break into. So I like to think that that's where the audience should be aiming, not necessarily medical devices, but a place where for me, I'd have to go in and show the surgeon and be there with them. They'd be asking me what endoscope they should be using for the procedure. They'd be asking me, I'd have to know the procedures. Obviously, I only know 3 procedures, whereas they know 400. So I'm not in any way comparing myself to the knowledge of a surgeon. But I would certainly have as much knowledge as a trainee going in there, a registrar, someone like that. And, I'd go on simulators and I'd be playing with the equipment so that I can offer the right questions if I saw something that wasn't quite right, to not alarm anyone. And there was the empathy and the rapport building element of telling a surgeon that they're wrong when they're inside a patient. And so there's multiple levels and depths to it. But I just encourage the audience to get into roles like that. So with that, Graham, and that's my spin on things, but I'm no expert. That's why I'm interviewing you. Where should the audience be aiming to if they want to get into those A-rated, A+ sales roles, and they do want to continue to have a great salary? Where should they be aiming for, kind of in 2017? What should they be doing now to position themselves for that kind of role in 2020?
It's funny you should be talking about medical devices. Will, my wife actually worked in the UK for a medical device company over there, so I've got some empathy with you there. It's a tough industry to be in, that one. But look, your question is really all centered around the key tenet of my book, and that is, in order to survive and thrive in the future, it's all about specialization. If a salesperson is going to be valued by the buyer, whichever industry, whichever product, whichever category, they have to see you as a specialist that can tell them something or bring them a commercial insight that they can't find themselves. Otherwise, why would they waste 5 minutes of their time talking to you on the phone or an hour of their time having a coffee with you if you're not educating them? I had a bit of an epiphany last year, it's a kind of a funny story. So I'm in the process of building my own business called Sales Tribe, and I was aware of the need to start to look at marketing automation technology. And I'd heard about this company called HubSpot. I didn't know much about it, but I'd heard about it. So I jumped on their website, and I'll tell the story fairly quickly if I can. I jumped on their website and I downloaded a white paper, knowing full well that would trigger a call from somebody. Sure enough, the following day I got a call from a young man named Jack Doran in the Sydney office here in Australia. HubSpot inbound marketing specialist was what he told me he was. And being the long-term sales guy, I put my sales hat on and I started to listen to the way this guy was running the call. And about 10 minutes into the call, I started to think, this guy's no good. He hasn't asked me a single compelling event question. He hasn't asked me about the time frames. He hasn't asked me about the purchasing process. He hasn't done any of the spin model on me. He's just educating me, which was terrific. But then it suddenly dawned on me that this is the new model. This is a guy who's a specialist, who's all about educating his buyer, who's telling me a whole bunch of stuff that I don't know. And he qualified that. He did a good job of understanding, or benchmarking my knowledge and then gradually educating me. So, to me, that is the new model. That is the way that salespeople will need to operate moving forward. No surprise coming from HubSpot, their founder and CEO, Brian Halligan, is famous for having said, create value before you try to extract value. And that's, I think HubSpot in that sense is setting the benchmark now for that new style of selling. I was taught, as I'm sure you were, Will, in the old days, it was all about the ABC of selling, always be closing. Well, now it's always be helping. And I stole that from someone else and I can't remember who now, but certainly I think HubSpot are doing it very well. And I write about that particular experience in the book a little bit as well. It's all about specializing. I keep saying to salespeople that I talk to on a daily basis, you've got to become digitally driven, socially connected, highly specialized, and mobile as much as possible as well.
It's funny you should mention HubSpot. Well, it's not funny you should mention it. It's almost to be expected at this point, and they are one of 3 companies in the past 6 months that I've done business with. And they come on board. They sponsored all the live content that we've done at the sales events. Hopefully they'll do some more towards the end of the year, beginning of next year. And I very specifically chose to, and it's great, obviously it's a great position to be in, to choose who I want to work with in the space. And we only have finite ad space and ad inventory to sell. But I very specifically work with HubSpot, Salesforce, kind of like one other individual smaller startup at this time that I don't think the audience will have seen yet, but they'll see in the next kind of quarter the work that we're doing with them. And it's because of what you just described of, I want to work with the companies that are pushing all this forward, not the ones that ring me and try and almost cold call me on getting some ad space, and it's all a bit weird and awkward. The conversation with HubSpot, I think they reached out and they wanted to feature me in a blog post, and that went on to a conversation about something else. And then I think that I literally just got an email saying, how can we work with you? And that was it, open-ended, and they let me pitch them, and we have obviously got a great working relationship moving forward. And that was a change of pace versus dealing with some of the sales enablement companies that we've done work with. Great companies, great products, but very sales-focused versus inbound-focused in HubSpot specifically. And it was definitely a change of pace for me. It was a change of pace of how I did a deal, how easily the deal came together. It was leaving a bit of meat on the bone in the negotiations on both sides, and not this ravage trying to squeeze out of me every single thing that they possibly could, which means that they don't get any ad space in the future, which has happened a couple of times now. Even though they've had great success, they've had a great ROI from working with the show and being on the show, and some of the other kind of other bits of content that we put together for them and lead gen that we've done for them, they just left somewhat of a bad taste in my mouth, and I've never wanted to work with them again. Even though the people were great, the company was great, it was just the tactics, the techniques, and everything else that they were using just to negotiate was all a bit weird for me. And I'm not saying this from a position of, I'm just being soft and I've not got the hustle to be in business and all this kind of stuff. It's just, I think a lot with the commoditization of products, buyers are probably in a position where if someone is a bit pushy on the phone, they just go, well, sod you, I'm just going to go with your competitor. The prices are similar. and we're going to go for service, which is a benefit for salespeople because that's your competitive advantage, right? The service that you can provide as an individual. So this is all a positive thing, I think, for the industry and the people listening. But yeah, it was interesting that you used HubSpot as an example because I've used them as an example in the past, and I enjoy working with them because there's this change in dynamic of them versus, again, some of the more sales focused companies that I have, and there's plenty that I haven't done business with that have tried to do business with us on that front as well. And with this, I'm conscious of time here, and there's one big topic that I don't want to gloss over because I think I can envision you being real passionate about this, Graham, and having some serious thoughts on it, and that is artificial intelligence. Clearly, I'm going to prerequisite this up in that no one really knows where this is going to go, and it's probably going to wipe us out in 100 years anyway. So this is probably a redundant conversation, and I'll try and keep these conversations as evergreen as possible so that people can check them out in a year or two's time. And it might just be a desolate wasteland of the Terminator walking around at that point, or the Matrix with scorched skies and all this good stuff. But how is kind of in the next 12, 24, 36 months, how is artificial intelligence going to change the landscape of sales?
Yeah, look, you're right. Nobody really knows, and I don't profess to have a close finger on the pulse when it comes to AI. But when you look at what all the big vendors are doing, IBM with Watson, and obviously Salesforce with Einstein, and where all of this is going, it's very clear that anything that's repetitive or routine about the sales role is going to be automated. There's no question. You'll like this story, I'm sure, Will. A little while ago, I think last year, I was invited to speak on another podcast, and the gentleman rang me, and we talked about just before the recording, we talked about what it was that we'd discuss. He said to me, "Look, I'll get my my assistant to send you an email, and we'll set up a time." So I got this email from Amy Ingram, and at that stage, I'd never heard of Amy Ingram, but she sends me an email saying, "Hey, listen, we're just trying to tee up a time. How does this time, how does that time, how does this time suit?" And I said, "Look, I'm sorry, that doesn't suit." Back in an email to her, "No, that doesn't suit." So she came back again with some alternative times. We went back and forward about 3 or 4 times, Will. And on the day of the podcast, the gentleman that was interviewing me said, "So how did you like dealing with my assistant?" And I said, "Oh, she was fine." "Why?" He said, "Well, you do realise that was an artificial intelligence bot, don't you?" And, the penny dropped for me that this is where it's headed, and Amy Ingram, AI, that was the initials, and everyone's heard of that now. But, it was a complete epiphany or light bulb moment for me that I could be having this exchange on email with an artificial intelligence bot to set up a meeting. And look, there's more and more of that technology coming on board every day. So I think, salespeople, beware, because there are elements of your role that you won't be doing in the future. And in the short-term future too, not just, 3-5 years from now. I'm talking probably next year. You've only got to look at, the sales stack technologies now, or the MarTech space. There's that many vendors playing in this space now. It's bound to happen that a lot of the roles. I just bought a car recently, Will, just as an example of a B2C sort of situation. And I did as we all do, I did all the research online myself. The only reason I went to the dealership was to say, "Give me the best price you can. I know what make I want, what model I want, what accessories, what colour, all of that. Just give me the price." Otherwise, I wouldn't have gone at all to the dealership. And you look at what Tesla's doing. They're selling their cars online. They're selling them in Nordstrom's. This is where the world's headed. And you can rail against it all you like, or you can say, right, it's time to start to, try and learn how to adapt. And that's what my entire theme of the book is about. How do we adapt?
Love it. And I think we can go one step deeper in this, perhaps, of emails must be somewhat easy to build a bot around. There's only so many responses, and then it can just spit out, if it doesn't understand, to someone, a real human being, then probably interacts in 5-10% of these emails, especially for something simple like scheduling. But when you look at companies like Gong.io, and there's other people in the same space doing real-time analytics of phone calls, which eventually will essentially tell you when to close. It'll tell you when there's an objection. It'll flash red lights. It'll give you, from the 1,000 other calls that have been made, how this objection was solved in the past, and the script to read. It's not, it's not a far-fetched thing to imagine that You just have voice synthesized on the back end of this, and it makes the call for you. And perhaps it doesn't do the whole sale. Clearly, there's a level of empathy, which is difficult to emulate. There's a level of rapport building, which is somewhat difficult to emulate. And there's also the emergency, like, oh shit moment when everything falls apart, when a person really needs to step in. Otherwise, you're going to lose, again, the kind of trust that somewhat has been built in the brand, in that you're just spamming at that point if you can't solve that problem. But it's not unreasonable to think that perhaps a cold call can set meetings and do somewhat of an SDR role, or it can email, call, text, do all this stuff from just one email, and it has the context from the data that you input into it as a real human, and then can build rapport, can ask about, oh, I believe you play basketball, and all this kind of stuff. And at that point, clearly it's not just sales which change, the whole planet changes, because I spend like an hour on the phone with my dad every morning. We have the same conversation every single day. I could probably automate that and save an hour save an hour of my day. It would take him 6 months before he noticed, most likely. So clearly there's far-reaching implications to all of this. But that's 12, 24 months away, and that just wipes out tens of thousands, if not hundreds of people, hundreds of thousands of people. It wipes out even more than that when you factor in call centers and customer support and customer service and people like this. That, yes, of course, if it's a high value product, you want a person on the phone, and there's an arbitrage to having a person on the phone. That can be a differentiator for your company if everyone else is using AI. But I honestly think people's minds are going to be blown, right, in the next kind of 5 years for sure, but as you kind of said, 12, 18 months from now.
Absolutely agree with you. And you mentioned Gong, and welcome to the new world of scrutiny, proper scrutiny of your sales performance, when you can have an artificial intelligence platform that's monitoring your performance on a call, and going right down to that nth degree about how much time did I spend talking versus the customer, and all of that analysis. So I think you're 100% right, Will. I think the next 2 years we're seeing more and more guided selling. There's more and more sales engagement platforms. Personal data fusion is another thing that I heard about recently that's now moving, putting the right information in the hands of the salesperson right at the moment that they need it, in the middle of a meeting, pulling data from all sorts of different sources, filtering it, and then making sense of it so that it can be used. This is where the world's headed, there's no doubt. So to your point, if you're in sales now and you're not getting yourself prepared to...
What do we need to do, Graham? I'm conscious of time here, and this is the kind of crux of the conversation now for everyone who's shitting the pants thinking they're going to get sacked in the next 6 weeks. What do we need to be doing now? What skills do we need to acquire? What companies do we need to be working at? What spaces, what industries, so that we can have success in this 5 to 10 year period? It's not as clear cut as I know, but what would be the best advice you could give to your nephew or one of your mate's sons, or one of your good friends who's been in sales for 10 years? How would you advise them?
Actually, someone asked me that exact question the other day on a comment on one of my posts. They said, what would you advise your son to do if he was about to go into sales? My answer was simply, get yourself the best education you possibly can, and find an area that you're passionate about, that's something that you want to be doing 3 years, 5 years from now, and make that your specialization. I think too many salespeople are just coasting along. Well, that's unfair. A lot of them are under such pressure now that they've got the blinkers on. They're running at 1,000,000 miles an hour at an ever-increasing quota, and they're underperforming more and more. So they don't have time in a lot of cases to actually start to think about where's my career headed. So reconciling, conflicting priorities in your career, setting a longer term goal. And by long term, I'm talking now, Will, 3 to 5 years maybe. Setting a goal any longer than 5 years, I think, is crazy given the speed of business. Assessing your current position, looking at, how you're going to get yourself to be that specialist in your industry, on your product or your category, whatever it is, so that your customer will actually value you. I feel for the generalist salesperson. I think they're just going to get pushed aside by, increasingly educated and demanding buyers. So for me, it's all about specialization. I don't think, to your question, the majority of salespeople have any say in which industry they work in. It's a flippant thing to say, oh, I'm just going to move industries and I'm going to go and work for that really cool company over there. The truth is those jobs are just not available. And typically it's the A-grade salespeople, the rock stars that are getting those jobs. So I think you have to be mindful of, sticking to your knitting to some extent and getting specialised, pursuing a passion, and developing commercial insights so that buyers actually want to talk to you. It's that simple. And of course, to do all of that, you need to get your social branding and your personal brand up to speed. You need to have a big network. Lee Bartlett speaks, and I think you may have spoken to Lee at some stage over there in the UK. Lee talks about the fact that we need to be able to have a network that can future-proof us against changes that might be made that are outside of your control. So, your network, your personal brand, your social voice, your ability to, protect yourself when the inevitable decision comes that, you're not needed anymore.
We'll have you back on in the future, Graham, to dive into personal brand. I've got it written down here in big writing. That's something I did want to dive into, and networking clearly ties in with that. Social, everything else obviously ties in. But just to take one step back, just to give the audience a little bit of context, because they seemingly like to enjoy Sales Nation. They enjoy the building of the business and the brand of the podcast and that as well. I very specifically chose a sales podcast when I could have done a marketing podcast. I could have done gone anywhere with it. But I chose sales because I thought 2 years ago it was ripe for disruption. I think we're just about to see the start of the real disruption now, of not the sales role, the sales kind of space, the hierarchy, the leadership reacting to things. I think we're going to see people getting sacked, laid off, the whole structure changing over the next 12, 24 months. And so that's why I created the show. I very specifically chose B2B sales professionals, because I think this podcast is going to start in one place, and I really do think it's going to end up in another 3-4. I committed to doing this for 5 years, so in another 3 years from here, I really do think that we're going to be in a completely different space altogether, and it's going to be really interesting to document this and to see the changes, and hopefully have the audience with guests like yourself, Graham, being at the forefront of all this. And with that, mate, I've got one final question, and then we'll wrap up, and that is something I ask everyone that comes on the show. If you could go back in time and speak to your younger self, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give him to help him become better at selling?
That's a good question. So I had another sort of light bulb moment in 2010 where we'd been through, the company I was working for, we'd been through 2 mergers, and I thought, right, it's time to finally, as a early 40s to mid 40s, time to go and get that MBA that I was talking about and had been talking about for the past 10 years. So having made that decision and gone and done that, I took 12 months out and actually spent, did an MBA full time basically. And it has, without sort of, exaggerating, it certainly has changed my life. And it's opened up so many new opportunities and instilled in me a new level of confidence that I didn't think I could get to. So, it's not just about, the academic qualifications. Everyone says it's about the network. It's about the change in mindset. So if I was going to answer your question, I would say go back and get educated earlier and never stop learning. Just, that old leaders are readers. I love that thing. Ever since I started the MBA, I've been just reading books constantly, and insatiable appetite for learning. I think if you haven't got that intellectual curiosity, that willingness to keep pushing yourself to learn and adapt and change, then you're going to struggle in the future. So that would be my answer.
Good stuff. There's probably a whole conversation to have on that and education and the way that sales is becoming seemingly more professionalized with degree courses in sales specifically. That's probably a conversation for another time as well. So I'll jot that down and we can come back to it. But with that, Graham, tell us a little bit about the book, because that's clearly the next step for most of the audience now who want to reframe where they're going in the next kind of 5 years. And tell us a little bit about Sales Tribe as well and how that fits into the mix for a good percentage of the audience, I imagine, as well.
Yeah, sure. So look, it actually came out of the MBA in 2012. I started doing some research into the changing nature of buyer behavior because I could see, the early signs back then of things changing and sales getting harder as a result. So I looked at buyer behavior and the implications for salespeople. That led to my first attempt at a book, which was my sales transformation. But this second book, which I'm proud to say has now gone Amazon bestseller, The Future of the Sales Profession, I started to say, okay, well, this is what's happening today, but where, like your podcast, where's it going to be in 5 years from now? So the whole ethos of the book is it's all very well to paint this bleak picture of the future, and it sounds a little bit alarmist. It sounds like I'm a scaremonger, but I'm certainly not. So I put my money where my mouth is, so to speak, with the book, and I said, all right, well, if this is happening now, what are we going to do about it? And section 3 in the book, I outline my 5 steps for salespeople to protect themselves and get themselves ready for the future that's coming. So that's the book. In doing the book, or in writing the book and researching and speaking with a lot of buyers, I also started to think, there's so many salespeople, as we've talked about already, the generalists in particular, that are facing career transition in the next 3 to 5 years, that there must be a business that I can build that can start to help those people, that can help them repurpose and reinvent themselves. I've been through a reinvention myself, and I started to think passionately about, I could be helping other people do exactly what I've done. And so that's where the idea of Sales Tribe began. And once we started to look at, my brother and I are the 2 founders of Sales Tribe, and once we started to look at, how can we help salespeople repurpose, it was then a case of, okay, what else can we do though? How can we reconnect them into a new role? So we started to look at, the massive growth that we're seeing in entrepreneurialism, the rise of the gig economy. We started to talk about, small businesses being a huge percentage overall of most GDPs of Western economies. And then we started to think, well, maybe there's a 2-sided platform here. We can help salespeople reinvent themselves and get repurposed, but then also reconnect them into, short-term gig type scenario, or even longer-term roles inside small businesses. Small businesses, frankly, can no longer afford the old in-house sales model, the traditional legacy model where you try and find a salesperson and train them up for 6 months, 9 months, and they're gone in 18 months. So there's this vision with Sales Tribe that we're solving 2 problems simultaneously. So I would encourage anyone that's listening that's in sales to jump onto salestribe.com and to register and watch the business grow. We are rapidly building products and services that we hope will help salespeople navigate this next turbulent period that we're entering.
Good stuff. Well, I'll link to all of that in the show notes of this episode over at salesmanpodcast.com. Graham, we'll have you back in the future, sir, because I think there's a whole lot more to dive into of all of this. And it would even be interesting to get your thoughts. We'll have you back in the meantime, but in 12 months, in 24 months, it'd be interesting to look back on this show and see how right or wrong we were. I think that'd be an interesting way to document things. And with that, mate, I want to thank you for your time, your insights, of course, and I want to thank you for joining us on the Salesman Podcast.
Absolute pleasure, Will. Thanks for having me.